Hi everyone, my name is Cynthia. Let's talk books. And today I finally have my February wrap up. It's been a little bit delayed because it's been a crazy time. I'm in the middle of moving. My university just went all online because I teach at a university in Los Angeles. Yeah. So between living off of boxes and having to redo my entire curriculum, it's been a time. But let's talk about books because this is the thing that's going to help us get through the tough times, right guys? So the first book that I finished in March was Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky by Kwame Mbalia. This book was good because it got me out of a slump after reading Midnight in Chernobyl at the end of January. Unfortunately, my library had the audiobook, and it's a really cute book. It's this young kid who is figuring out the magic that's in him in this magical world. It's a middle grade book, so some of you know if you've been watching some of my videos that I've been really into middle grade books for about the last year. And it was just the nice light book to read after Midnight in Chernobyl, which was really heavy. So I really liked it. I gave it 3.5 or 4 stars, so somewhere around there. I think that's just about right. The next book that I finished in February was In the Dream House by Carmen Machado. This is a fantastic, it's really a short memoir, but the narrative style is fantastic. She tells it, each chapter is kind of in a different genre. But ultimately, what she's doing in her memoir is telling the story of domestic abuse of her relationship with another woman. So she makes a point of bringing in some of the scholarly work and the fact that a domestic abuse within same-sex couples has not been studied enough, does not get talked about enough. And here's her story, right? Because she was not physically abused by her partner, but she was very much emotionally abused. And I just love the way she told this story. Listening to her was fantastic because she's the one that narrates the audiobook. So I highly recommend the book, and I highly recommend the audiobook. In fact, I loved it so much that next time I get a chance, I'm gonna buy the physical copy of it. It was just fantastic. The next book that I read in February was Erstwhile by H.E. Trent. I read this book thanks to Cousin over at Always Doing. It's a sci-fi fantasy romance. It's set in another planet, but the story is really about humans colonizing another race in space, and about what that means, largely told from the point of view of a female human who is a colonizer, but she is sympathetic towards the native people of this planet and the way that they have been treated by humans. There she encounters these men who, in order to survive, they need to be in a relationship with a woman. But the way their society functions, you kind of need these relationships of 2 males and 1 female, in order for the dynamics and the hormones to function properly. So it was just a really nice story with a lot of political historical themes, but also the romance is a big part of it, so I really appreciate that. There's a trope in this book that I really did not like, and I can't tell you which one it is without giving something away. So I'll just say that I really enjoyed this book. It was a 4-star read for me, and let's move on to the next one. The next book that I read in February was Innocent in Death. This is by J.D. Robb or Nora Roberts. It's book, what is it? It's 23 or 24. It must be, yeah, in the In Death series. And this was a really interesting story. The murder itself wasn't super interesting. The personal stories really took over here, and usually that's my favorite part of these books, but A lot of readers have issue with this book because there's a conflict between the main couple in the story, Eve and Rourke, and I really hated the way that Nora Roberts handled that conflict. A lot of times in conflicts between Eve and Rourke, the author tends to be siding with Rourke when, like, I'm siding with her. I think she's in the right, and that was very much the case here. I was 100% siding with Eve. I think her feelings were 100% legitimate, and that she was being gaslit by the author, and I did not appreciate that. So this was probably more of a like 2.5 3-star read for me. Yeah. Next book that I finished in February was Magpie Murders by Anthony Horowitz. Okay, part of this book I loved, but this is an interesting kind of narrative. So a large, like half the book, I would say, is the story within the story. It's book ended by like the in real life story where an editor gets a finished copy of a book that they're about to publish and she's reading it. We cut to the fiction story and then we come back to the real life stuff here. So the fictionalized book within the book was fantastic. It's kind of a cozy mystery that plays homage to Agatha Christie a ton. I love Agatha Christie and I loved that part of the story. The kind of in real life portion of it, which is still fiction, I didn't liked a lot less. It's the editor solving basically the mystery surrounding the author's death. And I found that really boring, like extremely boring. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that because otherwise I would just be going on and on about how boring those sections were, and it's probably not worth our time. In the end, so okay, I'll say one more thing. In the end, that was probably a 3-star read because I think the parts that are good are very good, but the parts that I felt were not, like, really were a letdown. So there's that. The next book that I finished in February was really the like antithesis to that book, and that is Oh My Gods by Alexandra Sheppard. I really liked it because this is, I think it's sold as YA, but it reads a lot more like a middle grade book, and you have this teenager who is living with her dad, who happens to be Suze, and her half-sister, who is Athena. And like what that means for her as a teenager trying to fit in at a new school, it's stinking cute. Our main character is Black and British, and so is our author, so its own voices for that. It was just a delightful, fun read. I would totally read more of this. The next book that I finished in February was The Witch Elm by Tana French. This was the last book I read for my in-person book club. Unfortunately, because of my move, I have to give up the book club, and this was the last pick for it. So this is a mystery thriller set in Ireland, and I think in the end it was more of a 3-star book for me. I liked parts of it, but I really hated the narrator. Like, our main character is like this entitled prick, rich kid, and who we spend like a third of the book going through, like, he gets beat up during a home robbery, and we don't know why he was robbed, and then he ends up like having to go through physical therapy, and he's basically not the same person after he goes through this. And before that, he was like the quintessential charming guy who can get anybody to like do whatever he wants because he's gorgeous and charming. And then while he's rehabbing, he ends up going to his uncle's house, which is kind of the family home, and they find a skeleton. And then the rest of the book is figuring out like who the skeleton is, how they were killed, all of that. And so there were parts that were really interesting. I would definitely read another Tana French book, but I felt like I really hated the main character, the narrator, and it was hard to get past that when we're seeing everything when we're seeing everything through his point of view. The next book that I finished in February was Creation and Death by J.D. Robb. So this was actually number 25 in the In Death series. So the other one was 24. But this was a fun book in the installment. It deals with a serial killer that Eve had encountered before, early on in her career, before the books take place. And now the killer shows up again, and he's focused on Eve herself. And I really like when the mystery is really good. Like this one was really good. The interpersonal relationships were really good, and it's just this has just been one of the standouts in the story for me. So really great. I got really into an in-death kick for a little while here. Because I was feeling a little slumpish, a little weird, and the in-depth books have become comfort food for me. The next book I read in February was The Lover by Marguerite Duras. This was February's installment for the Reading the French Classics series that I have on this channel. I do have a full dedicated review to this, but I'll just say here that it was fantastic. I love Marguerite Duras. She's one of my favorite writers of all time. If you've never seen Hiroshima Mon Amour, I highly recommend it. It's one of my favorite French films of all time. In fact, I always say it's my favorite French film of all time. And she wrote the script for it. I love the way that she depicts Asian man, and it's usually like an Asian man in a relationship with a white woman and the complications of those relationships. This one is in a colonial setting in French Indochina, which is modern day Vietnam. And I just really appreciated all the layers of emotion, of gender, of race that are in this book, even though it's a really short narrative. Yeah, I just cannot recommend it enough if you're into this kind of story. Next, I finished The Bittersweet Bride by Vanessa Riley. This is a Regency romance featuring a Black main female character. Vanessa Riley is African American, and I really have been looking for this kind of book because a lot of the discussions in romance about diversity in romance novels focus on like historical accuracy and how like why are you having a Black female or a Black character in a Regency book? Like that would have not been the case. And as a historian, I always like have to gasp and like say like what are you talking about? What kind of European history were you taught? Of course there were Black people in England, in Europe. And I really wanted to pick it up because she is one of the standout authors of that kind of representation in the genre. This book in particular did not hit all the right notes for me. It has the trope of like a single mother and a lot of miscommunication, a ton of miscommunication, which I hate. I hate when a simple conversation can solve a lot of things and they just keep not having it. It's also a second chance romance, which I tend to not like. And the child in the story has a disability. He's going blind, and the way that disability is spoken about by all the characters in the book is extremely ableist. I also felt like the hero did not deserve the heroine in this story, and like, in a romance, you really need to get to the point where like you are rooting for this couple, and like in the end, she wraps it up well enough, but when most of the story I'm thinking that he's an asshole, like he doesn't deserve her. It's a problem. But there was enough in this story that I did overall like quite a few aspects of it. And where I want to read more by Vanessa Riley. This, fortunately, is the first in a series, the Advertisements for Love series. So I'm looking forward to continuing the series and to actually reading Vanessa Riley's newest book, which is coming out this year. And looks like it might be a contemporary romance. I'm not 100% sure. No, I think it is historical romance. Well, either way, she's coming up with a brand new one. And I think it's going to be part of a different series, so I'm excited to read her more recent work. The next book that I read in February was Indigo by Beverly Jenkins. Finally, finally I read a Beverly Jenkins book, and I read this because I finally subscribed to Audible Escape, which is like a version of Audible where you get unlimited access to their romance titles. Not all of them, but like a selection of the romance titles. And when I saw they had Indigo, I immediately like subscribed, listened, and I loved it. It's a historical romance set in like pre-Civil War USA. And the characters are working in the Underground Railroad. They're abolitionists. They are fantastic. I cannot say enough good things about this. This was a 5-star read for me. It's not for everybody. I think if you're into the themes, the historical romances, this will be good. But a couple of things that I have to say, like, some of the tropes will not work for everybody, right? So one, the virginity trope plays a big role here. And as someone who reads a lot of historical romance, that has tended to be a really prevalent theme in historical romances. And so it didn't bother me, but it might bother other people because like it leans heavily into that. But I found the hero to be like super charming, the heroine to be strong-willed and independent and just freaking fantastic. I love their chemistry. I love the discussions of race. So if Indigo is any indication of the kind of writer that Beverly Jenkins is, I immediately need to pick up more of her books, and I do plan to. I have several other of her books. One is part of a series though, and I got the third one accidentally, so I need to go back and like pick up the first two. But I fell in love with her writing. I fell in love with her characters, and like I need to read more. I need to read more of Jenkins. So those of you who have been talking about her in your channels, thank you, because you're right. You've been right all along. The next book I finished in February was Know My Name, a Memoir by Chanel Miller. Chanel Miller, you might not know her name because it has remained anonymous until recently, until she's published this book and she has come out as the woman that Brock Turner assaulted. And here she is in this book telling us her story and really showing how horrible the whole process has been for her, like every step of the way, from like waking up and not knowing what happened to her, to then the legal justice system not working for her because he just got months in jail. And if anything good has happened out of this, it's that some of the awareness her case brought to the topic of sexual assault and the necessity to change the kind of rape culture that has dominated our society in the way we talk about sexual assault and consent. Chanel is a warrior. Her strength is immense, and I loved hearing her tell her story. I listened to the audiobook and she reads it, and it's just like there are a few moments during the story where you hear the emotion in her voice, and I appreciated that because it made her story that much more real to know that I was listening to her tell that story, and she tells it with such beauty and like heart. And that's what we need here when we hear these stories, to remember the victims and to prioritize the victims over the offenders. Like the offenders oftentimes get a lot of the attention, a lot of people's pity, and the victims get treated like objects. And like that's one of the things her story really brings out, and we need much more compassion in our public discussions of this. And I think this is a book everybody should read, like everybody. Yes. After reading Know My Name, I really needed something lighter. So I read Changeless by Gail Carriger. This is book number 2 in the Parasol Protectorate series. So because it's second in the series, I'm not going to say too much about it, except that it's a steampunk story with werewolves, vampires, supernatural creatures, soulless creatures, and it is fantastic. I love this. This was a 4-star read for me, and mostly because it came just at the right time. I think a lot of the times the way I rate books has to do with like my emotions and how I connect to the story. And this reminded me of why I ended up purchasing all the books in the series after reading the first one. The first one is Soulless, and I am not someone that was into steampunk before, but this is just such a delight, fun story that I highly recommend it. I just do. Go pick up Soulless if you haven't. If it's been on your TBR, really you should be moving it up. Fun, quick read. Enjoyed it, and I'll be picking up the third one pretty soon. So that is it. Those are all the books that I read in February. It was quite a bit, even though it was such a busy month. I actually anticipated reading a lot less, and then especially because some of these ended up being lighter and faster reads, I was able to fit in quite a bit. Audiobooks also really helped me because up until this week, my commute was really long because I will be teaching online for the rest of the semester. That will no longer be the case. So we'll see how that all goes. I'll be keeping you all updated. And actually, you can expect a minimum of 2 videos from me moving forward, and probably 3 during some weeks, because I really plan on devoting more time to this channel, since I will be spending less time in Los Angeles traffic. Let me know if you've read any of these books, if you have thoughts on them. I'd really love to chat about them or anything else down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.